Welcome, everybody, to another edition of UCF Football Now. Man, do we have a lot to talk about, a lot of concerns after this past week's game. We want to hear from you guys. Don't forget, we drop every Tuesday at OrlandoSentinel.com. We want you to leave comments, tell us what you think, topics, whatever you want, any input you want. We want to hear from you. This is your show, UCF football fans. I'm Mike Bianchi, sports columnist of the Orlando Sentinel. That man over there is Jason Beede. He is the UCF insider, the UCF beat writer for the Orlando Sentinel and OrlandoSentinel.com. All right, Jason, let's get it going with a little report card. Let's grade different aspects of the team, shall we?
Here's my first question for you. How would you grade the performance of John Rhys Plumlee against Louisville?
Well, I'll say this. He played better than Anthony Richardson played for the Gators on Saturday night, okay? But that's not saying much. I've got to give him a D. I mean, he looked like a quarterback on Friday night that hadn't played quarterback in a year and a half or 2 years, and we know that's the case. He was a wide receiver at Ole Miss. He was 6 of 16, I think, in the second half. 2 of 11 in the fourth quarter. They had a chance to score a late touchdown. He couldn't get it in the end zone. I've got to give him a D. I know he's just learning quarterback again, but that's the grade he gets. All right, Jason, let's grade the running game.
Yeah, I wasn't too impressed. I mean, I'll give him a C, a little bit better than John Rhys Plumlee just because, they didn't turn the ball over or anything like that. There were no fumbles of sort, but really, again, another poor performance. Isaiah Bowser, I think he carried less. Average per carry was less than 4 yards. Johnny Richardson, again, he had some moments and looked pretty solid, but he didn't play a whole lot compared to Bowser and the snap count. So I'm going to give him the running game a C. Moving on to the other position groups on offense, how would you grade the wide receivers, Mike?
Well, obviously, they were thin at wide receiver. Ryan O'Keefe goes out with an injury early in that game. Kobe Hudson, for whatever reason, did not play. Gus Malzahn was asked about Kobe Hudson. Where was he? He said he had some personal stuff to deal with. That usually means somebody's in trouble, all right? So I don't know what's going on with Kobe Hudson. But I'm going to give the receivers an incomplete because they didn't have their full array of receivers on the field Saturday night. What about the defense?
Yeah, the defense, I think, was the reason they had a chance to win the game. I'm going to give the defense a B+. The reason I won't give them an A is because Malik Cunningham did have that one run, and I figured that was going to come eventually. But look, the fact that they had 2 chances to win the game late was because of UCF's defense ability to get off the field and give the offense another chance. So B+, not an A, because again, Malik Cunningham did have success and UCF did lose the game. But if there's one shining moment for UCF, it was the defensive performance.
All right, let's grade the play calling. Gus Malzahn himself questioned his own play calling after the game, so I'm gonna give the play calling a C-. You mentioned Johnny Richardson earlier. The guy's averaging an outlandish number every time he touches the ball, whether it's by running the ball or catching passes. He had 5 carries, and I think he caught 2 passes the other night. You got to get the ball in Johnny Richardson's hands more, especially if Ryan O'Keefe is injured. And where was Kamari Gamble? He looked so good in the first game against South Carolina State, and he has 1 catch for 7 yards. So I'm going to give the play calling a C-.
I'll give the play calling a C+, just because the fact that they were without Ryan O'Keefe in the second half does limit what you can do. But with that being said, the fact that John Rhys Plumlee threw 3 incomplete passes on UCF's final draft game, I know they're limited on time, but you got to do something different with some of those play calls down the stretch. C+ because they were limited in what they had, but still not great play calling in my opinion.
All right, now obviously UCF fans had visions of an undefeated season and maybe making the college football playoff. Well, that's out the door now. They're not going to make the playoff. They're not going to go unbeaten. I thought those were pretty unrealistic goals anyways. So what does this loss do to the season? Is this one of the most disappointing losses in recent memory? Jason, I got to tell you, I don't think so. Louisville, even though even though they lost to Syracuse the week before, got drubbed by Syracuse, Louisville is a talented team. Malik Cunningham, he was the best quarterback I saw over the weekend. I was in Gainesville, and obviously I was at the UCF game on Friday. Malik Cunningham's experienced. He's good. He's mobile. Louisville's recruiting classes, I went back through the 24/7 rankings after the game. Louisville's recruited 3 of the last 4 years. They've had higher ranked recruiting classes than UCF. So there's no shame in losing to Louisville.
I'll say this on the loss. Maybe it won't be disappointing, the result. I think how they lost, the fact that the offense wasn't that explosive, the fact that they did struggle moving the ball down the field. Maybe the way they lost was disappointing more than the loss itself. I don't think it's the most disappointing loss by any means in recent memory. I'd say last year's loss was more disappointing, especially with how the game played out. Does this loss change the outlook on the season? I'm not so sure. I don't think UCF's schedule was strong enough even before the season began to make a college football playoff run. So really, if this loss happens any other way, look, UCF still has an opportunity to win the American Athletic Conference, make a New Year's Six Bowl, and maybe those were the realistic expectations the whole time. So does this change the outlook of the season a whole lot? I'm not sure. It's not like it's not like the quarterback went down like he did last year. So I think UCF can definitely bounce back from this.
Even more disappointing than the loss to me was the UCF fans, and there were a lot of them who were leaving the game early in the fourth quarter. It's a 6-point game, and these fans are piling out of the stadium on a Friday. Where do you got to go on a Friday night, Jason Beede? I don't understand sometimes when you wait for football season to get here. Oh, I can't wait for football season. Can't wait to go to the games. And then you're leaving before the conclusion, the best part. That's like leaving a movie 6 minutes before the movie's over, for crying out loud. I don't get it. We're going to play one word here. We're going to give a one-word answer. All right, let's start with UCF's penalty problems the first 2 games, particularly against Louisville. 11 penalties, I think, for 111 yards, including 2 penalties that called back long touchdowns. What's your word for that, Jason?
Concerning is the word that I'm going to use. It's concerning the second week in a row that UCF struggled with this. I think Gus Malzahn said it Monday. Look, you could probably call holding on every single play in football. With that said, though, some of these penalties, after the play penalties, when the play is already dead, some of those penalties they need to avoid, they can't avoid. So concerning is the word for me. You have to knock off those penalties for sure.
I'll go inexcusable. When you have 2 touchdowns that would have made the difference in the football game called back on penalties, that's inexcusable. And Gus Malzahn said it himself. This is on me. I've got to get this cleaned up, and I think he will. But penalties cost them the game essentially on Friday night. All right, one word to describe former UCF coach Scott Frost finally getting the plug pulled at Nebraska. He was fired on Sunday.
I think you just used the right word. Finally, it's about time. I mean, finally he got fired. I was pretty surprised that he wasn't fired last season. Expectations should be high in Nebraska. I understand, if anyone's going to have a longer leash, it is Scott Frost. But finally they fired him. I think, while it was probably pretty tough of a decision to make because he is Scott Frost and their golden child, it was finally the right time to do it.
Yeah, I'll go expected. You can't go, what was he, 10-36 overall, or it's some horrid record at Nebraska over 5 years. I will say this, though. I don't agree with some of the UCF fans who said he should have stayed at UCF. Well, yeah, in hindsight, but at the time, that was a job he had to take. He got a 7-year contract, making double what he was making at UCF, and he was going home. So I'm not going to fault Scott Frost for leaving UCF to go coach at his alma mater. All right, one word to describe the holding penalty that negated UCF's potential go-ahead touchdown.
I'm going to use tricky. I think when you look at what's shown on TV, it's tricky to see whether or not, Ryan Swoboda was actually holding him. From the angle that we have, I would say no, but clearly Ryan Swoboda is upset with himself. So maybe if we had another side angle or the back angle from what the ref's seen, who knows what his hands are doing if he grabbed the jersey a little bit. Tricky's the word I'd use.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna say Uh, Forget the hold. That's not one word. I'm trying to think of one word. Forget the holding penalty. UCF should have been called for offensive pass interference. Look at the defender go tumbling after the UCF receiver pushed him.
I understand UCF fans might be upset at the holding, but maybe they lucked out.
All right, next feature: something or nothing. Is it something or nothing that Mark Anthony Richards, R.J. Harvey, Trillion Coles haven't gotten any carries through 2 games?
This question is a little passive aggressive. It's obviously going to be something. We've heard so much about how deep UCF's running back room is. We haven't seen that at all. I mean, Isaiah Bowser is obviously going to get the majority of the carries in the game, and Johnny Richardson is going to do what he does. But the fact that we haven't seen any of those guys in the first 2 games get a carry, and 1 carry. RJ Harvey looked really good last, 2 springs ago before he suffered a torn ACL, and apparently he's back and practicing. So it is something that we haven't seen those guys yet.
I'm going to go nothing. I think it's something that Johnny Richardson's not getting more carries. I'm going to be on that. I'm going to die on that hill. Johnny Richardson might be their most exciting electric player. I just think the guy needs the ball in his hands more. If it means R.J. Harvey, Trillion Coles, and Mark Anthony Richards don't get the ball, I'm okay with that. But I would certainly get the ball in Johnny Richardson's hands more. Is it something or nothing that Kamore Gamble had only 1 catch for 7 yards Saturday night or Friday night?
It is something to me, especially when Alec Holler had a couple drops that really, made you question, what he can do for you. The fact that they didn't have Ryan O'Keefe in the second half, no Kobe Hudson, you'd think you'd rely on a guy like Kamora Gamble who has SEC experience. So it absolutely is something, and it's something to watch moving forward.
Yeah, I'll say it's something as well. Either John Rice Plumlee wasn't finding him, he wasn't open. I'll tell you this, I was at the Gator game on Saturday night. Kamori Gamble obviously transferred from UF. Florida could have used him on Saturday night because their receiving core is not as good as UCF's, and they could use him. And if Florida could use him in the SEC, I think UCF needs to use him more. Is it something or nothing that no Group of 5 team is ranked in the AP top 25 after all the upsets we saw over the weekend?
Well, I think Cincinnati should probably be ranked, and they're the second team out looking in. With that said, though, I think it's nothing right now at this point in the season. The AP poll doesn't really mean a whole lot, especially with the college football playoff rankings that come out later in the season. So for now, I think it's nothing.
Well, I'm going to say it's something. It's something to the schools who should be ranked. First of all, BYU, they're number 12. I realize they're an independent, but I still sort of consider them a Group of 5. But why isn't Appalachian State ranked? I mean, they beat a top 10 team. They should have beat North Carolina last week. They've proven that they can play with the big boys. Why isn't Marshall ranked? They beat Notre Dame. Marshall's undefeated. For those schools and those fan bases, it would be a big deal for them to be ranked in the top 25. I don't care if it's early in the season or not. So absolutely, I think it's something. All right, FAU coming up this week. FAU hasn't really played anybody yet. They're 2-1. They beat Southeastern Louisiana last week, 42-9. They lost to Ohio in week 1. The line opened at 12. It's now 9.5. Any concerns for UCF Saturday night?
I think the only thing is that this is FAU's biggest home game of the season. I've seen that from a couple FAU fans on social media, and they really ramped up. They want to show that they belong in the American Athletic Conference, which is where they're headed next year. UCF's played FAU a couple times. It always seems to be a pretty fun game. I think it's an easy road trip. I don't think it's a trap game for the Knights. I think UCF should be able to bounce back on the road, and maybe the game's a little bit closer than expected. It is interesting you mentioned the line and the game shifting already, but UCF should be able to bounce back on the road this week, I think.
Yeah, they should, unless they go into FAU down in the dumps and licking their wounds and all of that, because FAU, even though they're not as talented as UCF, they have a bunch of transfers as well. And to me, the transfer portal has been the big equalizer in college football. So, FAU's quarterback, didn't he play at Miami last year?
Yeah, N'Kosi Perry, he seems to be having success at FAU. Look, UCF lost to Louisville last year, went on the road and lost to a team on the road that they were supposed to beat at Navy. And obviously, they were down a bunch of different guys, but still, it's certainly not impossible for FAU to do something this week.
All right, let's do a little rapid fire, shall we? I'll start it off. Does it make the loss to Louisville a little easier to swallow for UCF fans, considering Notre Dame lost to Marshall and Texas A&M lost to Appalachian State?
I think so. I have proof of that too, because I saw multiple fans say, "Well, at least we're not A&M," or "Well, at least we're not Notre Dame." I mean, I think maybe it doesn't take away from the loss, but I think it does make it harder to swallow for sure. Nebraska lost to Georgia Southern. That's what put the nail in the coffin for Scott Frost, Mike. Could you see Scott Frost? Here's my question. Could you see Scott Frost ending up as the coach at USF?
No way, no how. All right, first of all, I don't think USF is going to fire Jeff Scott unless the bottom just totally falls out this year. I think a more realistic career path for Scott Frost is to become an offensive coordinator at a Power 5 school, maybe UCLA, where his former boss Chip Kelly is the head coach at UCLA, or maybe Jason Beede, he goes to the Nick Saban School of Rehabilitated Coaches, goes and coaches for Nick Saban for a year or two, and then gets another head coaching job after that. What question do I have for you? Is the Sun Belt better than the American?
I think after this weekend, there's a real, what other conference can deliver 2 top 10 wins on the road and a third on the road that got their head coach fired? I mean, it's a pretty impressive performance from the Sun Belt. I wouldn't necessarily say Power 6, using Mike Oresco's term there, but look, when you have playoff expansion and the top 6 conference champions are getting an automatic bid, I think you're definitely going to see a Sun Belt team or two over the next couple of years when the playoff expands, for sure. Going back to UCF, Daniel Barski, Mike, missed another field goal, this time from 32 yards. Should UCF always go for it on 4th down?
Wow, that's a good question. Daniel Barski missed a kick against South Carolina State. He's missed kicks dating back to last season. He is in a real slump right now, unless it's just, I guess 32 yards would be a chip shot. No, you still have to at least attempt a field goal if it's a chip shot. But if it's like 40 yards or more, then yeah, I would go for it right now. I don't know who UCF's backup kicker is. You probably know. Isn't he an option, Jason?
Yeah, Colton Boomer was a freshman. He's a local kid. I think he had a quad injury in camp that limited him, so I don't think he's 100%. Look, otherwise, I think Gus Malzahn would like to have someone else kick field goals. Obviously, when you're missing 32-yard field goals, you probably want to look at your other options.
Are you kidding me? Colton Boomer. If you have a name like Boomer as your kicker, you've got to put him in there.
Gus Malzahn mentioned on Monday there's going to be some competition this week, so who knows what's going to happen at FAU.
All right, I'm a little confused. Former 5-star prospect Terrence Lewis, a linebacker, announced last week he's entering the transfer portal. He hasn't even been at UCF but a couple of months. What's going on with this?
Yeah, it just seems like frustration. I mean, he got beat out. He wasn't on UCF's 2-deep depth chart, hasn't played yet. He's not on the online roster right now, so I'm not expecting him to ever play it down again for UCF, even though he did delete that tweet that said he was going to enter the portal, and he put UCF messaging back on his social media. Maybe there can be some worked out, but when you're removed from the online roster, that's based on the previous, last year or so, what we've seen from players. That usually is a good sign you're probably done here. Number 1 overall pick for the Orlando Magic, Paulo Banchero. He was at the UCF game this week. I know they've had Magic players before, Mike, but what are your thoughts on having number 1 overall pick, Paulo Banchero? I
think it's great that Magic players are showing up at UCF games. Cole Anthony was there against South Carolina State. Get a little civic energy going among the teams in the city. I think it's awesome. And unlike some of those other UCF fans, I think Paulo Banchero actually stayed for the whole game. Unlike, as I said, some of the UCF fans who chose to leave in the 4th quarter with only a 6-point game. I'm going to stay on that. I'm going to stay on you UCF fans who are leaving games early. All right, Jason, tell us about your fan of the week, and it's not Paolo Banchero.
This fan is not one that's going to leave games early. This is a fan, Knight fan Stan. He's been around the program for a long time. I think a lot of people may not know who he is, but they would definitely recognize him. He has a fantastic sign that he carries at every game, and he's just a really big supporter. And I don't think we've talked about him on the show in the past, so he's my fan of the week, and he deserves a shout out for his passion for UCF.
Absolutely. I love Knight fan Stan. He calls into the radio show, texts in, always emails talking about UCF. He is a great supporter of the program. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of UCF Football Now. Do not forget, we drop every Tuesday at OrlandoSentinel.com. You can also find us on your YouTube channel. Don't forget to leave comments. We want to hear from you. This is your show, UCF fans. For Jason Beede, I'm Mike Bianchi. We will talk to you next week on another edition of UCF Football Now.